SamiZaatari in his latest video illustrates perfectly why it is so dangerous to try and make statements about another group of people, about somebody else, based on a complete misunderstanding or a misrepresentation of that person's position. Now I find that really amusing, to be perfectly honest with you, because he, as a Muslim, should understand how dangerous that is, having been himself the target of such practices on a pretty much continual basis for the last several years. So why he thinks that he is entitled to do this to other people, and specifically the group of people that he seems to have singled out as his opponents in some way, the atheists, is beyond me. But anyway, let's get to it. In his latest video, SamiZaatari claims that he is in the fortunate position that he has an objective set of moral rules to live by, whereas we atheists are in a very confusing situation in which we cannot make sense of any imperative to, as he calls it, do good. Now, the first thing is, I want to hand him his own assertion that he has in fact an objective set of rules to live by. I will give him that. He does indeed have an objective set of rules to live by. The reason for that is very simple. Those rules were invented by a group of people of whom he was not a part. These people invented the religion that he is now a follower of, and these people invented the rules. To those people, he is external. They can look at him as something external to themselves, and they can therefore see him as the object of what they are talking about. And they can therefore make statements that to them at least will seem objective, and they can set rules that he needs to follow that are, as far as he is concerned, objective. Congratulations, Sami, you have objective rules to live by. But what you are completely misunderstanding is the fact that even though we atheists do not have that luxury of letting other people think for us, we do not live in a subjective free-for-all in which anything goes. All of us, atheists, Muslims, or anybody else, are taking part in a society where we have to deal with other people. And this is where you are making your most important mistake, Sami. You think that an understanding of how evolution works will give a person a moral imperative on which to base their decisions on what is right and what is wrong. And that is blatant nonsense. And you know this, Sami. Do not tell me that you do not understand this concept. For some reason, I feel you are choosing to ignore this. Because I suppose this does not feed into the propaganda that you are trying to spread here, which I quite frankly find detestable. You know full well that an understanding of how things are does not equate to a moral imperative of how things should be. So understanding that organisms multiply faster to the point where they will get to the point where there aren't enough resources for all of them does not mean that it is therefore right that many of them should fall by the wayside and die, and that we should encourage such a thing, and that we should just let people who are in the unfortunate position that they're unable to compete for the resources with the rest of us just die. That is an unfortunate reality in a situation where we outbreed the availability of resources, that doesn't mean by any stretch of the imagination that such a thing is therefore right, and that we should therefore not only condone it, allow it to happen, but actively encourage it. Whoever gave you the idea that any sane person, atheist or otherwise, would espouse such an ideology? You mention yourself social Darwinism, which is a misnomer par excellence, because it is the abuse of the name of a great scientist for an ideology which is frankly despicable to the core. Now, what then does motivate an atheist, a decent human being who happens to not believe in any gods, to do things that are good? Well, the jury is still out on this one to a large extent, or to some extent, but there are some inroads being made into answering those questions. And evolution does actually have something to do with this, but not in the way that it informs us what should be right or what should be wrong, but simply in the sense that apparently during the evolution of our species, we were in a situation where we had to learn to cooperate with each other, to work together, to help each other in order to get things done, to survive, because the only way we could apparently survive under whatever circumstances caused this extreme bottleneck in our evolutionary past, the only way we could possibly survive was by working together, because if we were going our own way, we were going to die. So those of us who had that tendency, those of our ancestors who had that tendency to cooperate, managed to survive and pass on the genes that provided this trait we have to care about other people. All human beings come equipped with a set of what are called mirror neurons. They are the neurons that fire in your brain in response to seeing another person do something or undergo something or suffer or whatever. This is what makes you look at a person who is suffering and to some extent feel their pain. This is what causes empathy, and that may have some strange evolutionary reason behind it. This may have evolved for some evolutionary reason that has to do with the so-called selfish rationale that the genes employ in order to produce as many possible of their own copies. But in the end, what it boils down to is that if a normal, emotionally healthy human being, regardless of whether they are an atheist or not, perceive another person's suffering, they feel for that person. They feel their pain. They feel connected to that person's suffering. When we perceive unfairness rather, we feel outrage, even when we perceive it as happening to another person. It is those feelings, those emotional responses, those instinctive emotional responses to seeing suffering, pain, unfairness, injustice around us that motivate us to do the right thing. That is not because the right thing is something that is objectively out there and determined by some god or other. It is simply defined by the fact that we human beings, by and large, are very alike to one another. And we can understand each other, we can communicate with each other, and we can feel each other's pain if we are emotionally healthy. We can understand what it's like for another person to suffer and to suffer injustice, to be unfairly treated. And we respond to that emotionally. And that is what motivates us to do right. Is that objective? No. But frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.